love is facilitating meetings, conversations and discussions, especially those hard ones, and coming up with a solution to what you may feel is a common problem, or even just a challenge when it comes to organizing meetings. The other thing I just wanted to say a little bit about is that I'm passionate about mindfulness. So you'll see a little bit of that throughout this. I just want to get started there. And then before I move on, I did want to try to say we are living in strange times right now. So I know working from home has its challenges, or even just working at your workplace during this pandemic. So I'm going to make suggestions and to give you tips and techniques, but I want everyone to know that I want people to realize that the challenge here is to be efficient and not necessarily at the most productive as we can be, as we think we should be. I want to transcend the notion that we should be productive right now. So I really just hope this saves you time and makes your meetings a little bit cleaner and crisper. Just a reminder to prioritize, is this absolutely necessary? Do I need to have this meeting? Will an email suffice? I want everyone to think that this is that time to kind of rethink any of those strategies there. So to begin, do have some objectives because I suggest having a meeting agenda and objectives. So I want to share some facilitation techniques, of course, some advice on how to prepare, implement, and follow up after the meeting, of course. And then I want to create a conversation. So toward the end of my presentation, in between some of the slides, I will be asking for some feedback from you all. So I hope you will engage with me there. So I do want to make a quick note about facilitation. I'll be using some terms and suggesting some activities that you can do. I do have those linked in the resources at the end, but feel free to type in the chat. I have it pulled up here, but I know Devin is keeping an eye on that as well. Feel free to ask me questions throughout. I by no means know everything. These are just things that I feel have helped me and have really been helpful in me thinking about how do I want to approach this session, this meeting, this conversation, this discussion. And I feel like some of that carries over from in-person meetings to online and some does not. So I just want to make that note that I will be giving you resources at the end so you'll know. Okay. So the first part is obviously preparation. I think any successful meeting, conference, discussion, conversation, I think that it obviously benefits from preparation. And I do love the quote, begin with the end in mind, right? So backward planning, I really feel like that, that aids in what you should be doing in your session, right? So before I talked about, thinking about, is this a priority? Should I particularly send out an email or just contact people individually? Do I need to have this meeting right now? Can this wait? So I think even that, you can kind of go through, and as you build your agenda, you're probably like, I only have 3 things on this agenda. It can probably wait to the next meeting, or it can be a simple email to the whole group, the whole team, or just individuals. So in my kind of prep work, I kind of break it down into thinking about the format, actually doing the planning, practicing, and then communicating, right? We definitely want to go through these different steps so that once you're in the meeting, we don't have so many surprises, right? So, sorry. With format, you want to make sure that you decide on the format. Is this just straight informational? Or is this a discussion that you want to have a lot of interaction with? Do you need feedback directly from certain people? If so, assign them as one of the speakers or assign them in the agenda. Make sure that you are looking at your old agendas and seeing if there were old action items and old things that you had to follow up on and add those to the new agenda. And I think you want to, when it comes to format, I know at my university, at my institution, we have several online conferencing software options now, especially with the move to online classes and stuff. So I think even choosing obviously the right platform can be a part of this planning stages. And that may be good for you to look at what your participants already are comfortable with or using, and also what you're comfortable with. If you don't know that information about your participants, then use what you're comfortable with so that you can have a smooth meeting. When planning, again, make sure you build that agenda, set some objectives if that kind of feels a little bit better for you, and then build in time. Even if you don't share time, the time frame for each item with your participants, definitely try to have an idea. Like I have timestamps right now that I'm looking at to make sure, like I have, all right, by 2:10, I wanted to make sure I was through this first section, you know? So just try to make sure that you build in some time and give yourself wiggle room. Don't, if you're in your practice phase and you're like, oh, it took me exactly 6 minutes to talk through this. Don't give yourself 6 minutes during the actual presentation or the actual information. Give yourself 10 minutes if you can. Something that I do with backward planning is I actually map out the time sometimes before I even put in the agenda item. So I know maybe I should prioritize this agenda item, put it at the front because it might get lost, or I might have to bump it to the next meeting. So I definitely look at time as a factor that helps inform me, if not necessarily my participants. I always say plan to use a parking lot. So here's my first facilitation term. A parking lot, it's been called several different things, but basically at the bottom of your agenda, you can do open discussion or you can have a parking lot. So if you find that a conversation or a topic item is taking way longer than you had planned for, or you need to do some follow-up, you need to do some research on that topic to come back to it, put it in the parking lot. The parking lot comes at the end of the agenda so that if you have time, you can go back to it, or you make sure you know for the next agenda or the next meeting, you are able to plug that item from the parking lot in there too. This also is a way for people to be heard, or for people who may go on tangents and who may go off topic to feel like they still have a place in your meeting and they are heard while still trying to stay on track. So just create that parking lot, tell people what it is so that they are aware, and just use that to the best of your ability. So I love a parking lot. Anytime I see it, I'm like, yes, okay, I know that they care about what I have to say, and that they care about, time and trying to fit everything in as much as they can. So efficiency, right? If you can plan to use a co-facilitator, I am very grateful that Devin has been as wonderful with her level of support and with NC Live. And we met before this conversation here, before we actually had the session here. And I was able to kind of really plan out my session with her. And obviously she supported me by watching the chat and, taking on any of the technical difficulties. So if you can, please try to have a co-facilitator. You may find another me on your team or in your group who loves to plan, who loves to write agendas, who loves to kind of keep track of action items. So find that, diamond in the rough, if I may say. Build in conversation starters. So it's more facilitation talk here. Conversation starters, icebreakers, and energizers. I have a couple of things that I found linked in the resources slide, but conversation starters. If there's people who are worried about silence, if you have things you want to discuss, have follow-up questions, have conversation starters. If you feel that there's too long of silence, because we'll talk about silence a little bit more later, have something on deck. Just have something that you feel like you can throw in there to maybe ask the question a different way or to get more people involved. Icebreakers, I think we've all been through an icebreaker whether we love it or not, but they do work when you're trying to integrate two teams that don't know each other, or you're trying to get to know someone who's new to the team. An energizer really is a tool or technique that it can be a conversation starter or icebreaker, but you're basically inserting it after a certain amount of time. So an energizer would probably be after the halfway mark, or a way for you to just tell people to get up and stretch or something, just so you can kind of bring people back to the meeting. So definitely feel like you can just pull generic conversation starters, icebreakers, or energizers, or they can be very specific to your topic. In the planning phase, this is where you want to determine whether or not you want your participants to share video. So we have a lot of people here today. I can't see how many, but a lot don't have their video, and I think that's totally fine. This is a webinar. We will have conversation later, and I hope people will turn their video on if they feel they want to, but it's not necessary. We didn't say so, but my advice is to not require video. Because once you require it, some people will have some resentment. I know it's kind of one of those things where you're like, but then will they interact, and how will I know they're really engaged in what I'm saying and what I'm doing? And I'm thinking, if you were in person, would you really know? If someone's writing notes and not looking at your projected slideshow, would you know that that person was engaged? If that person is checking email on their phone, would you know that they're engaged in person? And I just feel like that's when you really only require it if they are actually presenting on a topic, if they actually have some investment in it, or if you need a vote. If you have to have something procedural and you need a vote, then you can require it. But even then, I would encourage you to use to ask people to use the chat, because it's easier for you to maybe tabulate, your co-facilitator to tabulate, or use the reactions. We're using Zoom right now. We have easy reactions that people can use as well. So you can even do physical reactions. So thumbs up if you agree, or thumbs in the middle, or thumbs down, or, maybe you can have something that says, I want more conversation. So, all right. Practice. Again, if you are lucky enough to have a co-facilitator, please ask them to practice with you. Take one or two coworkers and practice, or friends and family. I had a couple of faculty members who were we transitioned from WebEx to Zoom, although we still have WebEx. And we just had a couple practice sessions on Zoom so they could just practice what they want to do in their courses. And I think if you have the time, please practice, especially if you're dealing with different technology or technology you're not comfortable with. If you want to become more comfortable and you don't want to be alone, definitely do that. I would say too, if you could, your co-facilitator could be someone who's very tech savvy and who can actually train in technology, and they can actually kind of help you walk through the different techniques. It's one thing to watch a YouTube video or attend a training, but to get that one-on-one help is really, I know, significant, and why some faculty reached out to me. Record yourself. We're on Zoom right now. In Zoom, it's really easy to record yourself. You can in WebEx, I found out. But if you feel like you don't want to practice with another person, just open up Zoom, even the free account, you can record yourself, see how you look, see how your microphone looks. And I do that every time I create a tutorial. If I'm about to record a tutorial, I do just a quick test record and make sure that I sound correctly. There's no background noise, or I just have everything the way I want it to be said. Okay, so the last thing I'll say with the practice session, make a copy of your final agenda and jot down some notes. So agendas, you want them to be kind of short and sweet and to the point. You don't want them muddled. You want them to be exactly to what you're speaking on. But again, there may be some things that you might want to insert in there that you want to keep in mind to mention later. Or you might, if you're like me sometimes, if you feel like something will come up in conversation that you want to address and you want to have some canned responses in there to kind of make sure you cover all your bases, whether it's policy, procedure, stuff like that, then just copy your agenda, jot down some notes within your copy, right? Okay, communicate. I think this is probably one of the most important things about the prep work. Communicate to people, send them the agenda, make sure they know that they're on the agenda if they can't attend the meeting, but you have them down for an agenda item, that's awkward. I also feel like if you communicate beforehand, invite your participants to help build the agenda. Maybe you feel like you shouldn't have a meeting and you're like, oh, let me just send out an email. Follow up and say, were there agenda items or were there things that we need to discuss? So you can make the first pass at the agenda and then maybe the second draft, your participants, your team is contributing to that as well. That's another way to have people engaged. If they feel like they have a part in the creation or setting the agenda, they might be more inclined to be a part of your meeting or to interact during your meeting. Consider an open agenda. Again, this is if you want more of your participants to feel like they've been heard. So an open agenda is very similar to if you've been to an own conference, you say there is no set agenda, there are no topics, everything is on the table, and you set the agenda during the meeting. And if you find that you don't need to meet, don't meet. I want to say that again. And then communicate, especially if there's pre-work. If there's a video you want them to see beforehand, if there's any considerations, again, if you need to vote on something, if there's something procedural or policy or something that's really important that you need people to think about beforehand, having people think about really hard topics and really large concepts during the meeting does not work. And that's why you might be getting a lot of silence. So send that agenda, send any pre-work, send them considerations before the meeting, and actually suggest a due date. I'm one of those people, if you tell me, watch this before the meeting, I may be watching it right before the meeting starts. So if you say, oh, watch this, Wednesday before the meeting is due to watch or something, there's no reason to follow up with them, but just give them that deadline. And if you're like me, you might schedule it. Okay. All right. So some tools that you can use. Oh, and my formatting got a little off there, but that's okay. I would say if you're comfortable, use your own create your own project management style. Use a tool that is project management based if you feel like that is helpful for you. It can be harmful. It can create a lot of work that you just spend a lot of time. It may take up a lot of time you don't have, or just document management tool, right? A lot of us use Google Docs, Google Drive. And so you can create a folder for your team, for your whatever topic it is, and then put those agendas in there and any notes, any action items, any follow-up items, any files that they might need to review beforehand, of course. I remember at Charlotte Library, we were more Microsoft based, and I used OneNote, and I loved using OneNote for their notebook function. It's kind of built as a note-taking software application, but really it's kind of project management because you can create a notebook per topic, and you can have different, obviously, agendas or other project related tools within a different notebook, and you can have like chapters within each notebook. So check that out. Watch a YouTube video on OneNote, Microsoft OneNote, if you feel like that might be useful for you. You can use it in the browser and as a software download if you have Microsoft Office. Okay, and I'm a big proponent of using paper. I am here to say that I love taking notes in Google Drive. It's really great to have it all in one place. But my personal notes, anything I need to write, so sometimes when I rewrite or copy my agenda, I will write it down in my notebook. I have several notebooks. I've gone through about 4 since I started at UNC-Charlotte now. And I like writing things down. That's my kind of style of retention. I retain information much better if I write them down. I sometimes will print out agendas and write on the agenda and then actually type the notes later. So that's just, again, if you have time, you can do that too. At the bottom here, I do love this, again, just putting on my kind of facilitation hat, this 5-minute meeting planner from the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I have linked it here. Let's see if it'll open up for us. Hopefully you guys can see that. Can you see? Probably not.
You may need to do a new screen share.
Yeah, okay. Let me see. Okay, great. But basically, it's just a PDF, and it asks you a series of questions. If you're one of those people where you're like, I don't even know where to start. This is a great tool for you, and it's something that you can use for each meeting. You can't see it here because I think it opened it up in Firefox, but this is an editable PDF if you open it up in Adobe or in Chrome, I believe. And you're able to kind of go through this kind of checklist of things if you want to. This was something that I used very early on when I was leading some different teams at the public library, and I thought it was really helpful. Okay, let's see if I can get back to the, yes, okay. Wait, no, wrong one. Oh gosh. Okay, that's right. Okay. I lost one of my windows, that's what happened. All right, here we go. Okay, so that's the 5-minute planning tool. One kind of just overall tip, global tip, give yourself time before, during, and after. I know time is a luxury, and some people are like, what is time? How does time exist right now? I get that, but I'm one of those people that if I don't plan, if I don't prepare, if I don't even build an extra time during the meeting, I'm not successful in my view, in my kind of assessment. I want people to know that even that 5-minute planning tool, take the 5 or 10 minutes, actually build it into your calendar. So, you know, before this presentation, I would try to build in 30-minute hour blocks to try to work on this, or even just to pull everything together. So maybe just even put it in smaller chunks if you feel like it, and definitely do that. During the meeting, I kind of want to suggest some mindfulness. I would say take time to include mindfulness with yourself and in your meeting. Use a breathing exercise. Takes 1 minute, takes 2 minutes, takes 5 minutes. And I think that I've found that a lot of people who have used breathing exercises really feel like, you know, the person who's facilitating, who's leading the meeting really cares about their well-being, and it's kind of helps you. So one breathing exercise that I use a lot is just the 4 count. And so all you do is you breathe in for 4 counts, you hold it for 4 counts, and you breathe out for 4 counts, and you hold it for 4 counts. So we're just going to take 2 seconds and do that ourselves, since we're giving ourselves time. So I'm going to guide you along. So don't feel like you have to do this. This is optional. But for 4 counts, we're going to breathe in, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Out, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. And that just helps people ground themselves coming into the meeting. It helps them calm. I'm a little bit less nervous talking to you right now because I was able to take that breath. So definitely do that as well. The other thing that you might want to build into your agendas, especially again right now because we're living in these strange times, is to do a check-in and make it a habit. Build 10 minutes at the beginning of every meeting, or maybe 10 minutes at the end. Show the participants that you really want to get to know them and that you are here to just talk about something mundane. How was your week? Or what did your cat do this week on Zoom? Or you might be able to be just a small measure of support for someone who may be struggling right now, or in general, not even when the pandemic is over. So do a check-in, build it into your agenda. I think that's definitely something that's worth giving your time. Okay. All right. Implementation. So I want to have a quick note about guidelines, meeting norms, and group agreements. They are helpful until they're not. I think they're helpful when you develop them with your team. When they're collaborative, when they are something that everybody actually agrees on together, or at least had a hand in having conversation and discourse around, I think they're helpful then. If they are just these kind of static things you never address again, and they are never revisited after that time you share them, they may not be that helpful because you may have people in that meeting that come to future meetings. Definitely just have them maybe up on the screen when people are coming into the meeting. And I do have a resource to develop them on the slides, the slide that has the resources. And make sure it's a living document. Make sure that your team knows and your participant knows that we can change this. And try to refer back to them. If something happens, if an issue arises, refer back to them and make it so that, this is an agreement between us two. This is not me telling you what to do during meetings. I'm saying that we together have mutually agreed that these are what we are going to try to hold true each meeting when we meet. So just keep that in mind. I myself believe short or having really small, not short, a short list. I don't think you have to have 10 group agreements that might be really hard for people to remember, even if you have them up on the screen when they come into the meeting. But have a good set of 3 to 5, just so that everybody kind of knows they are literally on the same page. And again, like I said, if you develop them together, that could be a special bonding that you have online right now. So that might be something to do. Okay, so during our meeting in the implementation phase, we have our agenda and objectives, right? We are tracking action items, we're tracking people, any follow-up, any referrals we need to make, and we'll talk about the follow-up plan, but create a follow-up plan as well. So build that into your action items, and maybe that's even built into your parking lot. If you have your parking lot at the end, maybe you just know, okay, we're gonna run out of time. We're gonna have to put that parking lot on the next agenda, this item here. Okay, tools, leveraging your online software. So this is my technology disclaimer. Use those tools if they are helpful for you and you know how to use them. Sometimes they can work against you. I was really grateful that Devin was able to send out a pre-survey to those of you who signed up within a certain amount of time. That allowed me to feel like I don't need to do any kind of quick assessment coming into the meeting, into the webinar. And I felt like I was able to kind of build my my presentation around kind of what your concerns were and were before. So definitely leverage software and technology the best way you can. I will just say too, if you can, have 2 screens, whether that's 2 monitors or like right now I'm using a laptop and a monitor. Even if you can get away with it, use your smartphone and or tablet and your laptop monitor or your computer monitor. Just having that second screen really helps. I'm able to view my notes here and look at you directly. And then I have the presentation over here so I know, okay, I'm on the right slide. This is also really great in Zoom or WebEx. They can kind of identify which window to share from. So definitely consider that if you can. I know budgets don't allow, so I know that's hard sometimes. The other thing I want to say is be flexible with your other participants. If they don't have access to technology, if they aren't able to use certain things like virtual backgrounds, a virtual background, for those of you who don't know, and Zoom and other, I think Google Meet has this now. You can blur your background or you can have it be a scenic beach, which we would all like to be on right now. Devin has one on right now. So, but there are some computers, some of my coworkers were issued older laptops and they aren't able to use a virtual background. And that might be why they don't have their video on. They may not have a quiet corner in their house. They may not have, the plant chaos I have behind me and they feel like that's fine. So, so if people aren't on video, that's another way just to say, you know what, it might just be a bad day. Or they may not just be able to blur their background and so they can't come on video. So just be flexible. All right. So I put some options up here for tools for polling software, interactive software. These are ones that I've used and that I like. We talked earlier about Google Drive and Google Docs. You can use that to actually build out your agenda, share your agenda, have a collaborative agenda. You can also use that as an annotation tool if you want, so that people are working through, and not just through the chat, but they're actually working through a Google Doc with a series of questions. There's several different ways you can use that, but Mentimeter, Poll Everywhere, and Slido are 3 that are kind of polling, interactive. I really like Mentimeter when I can use it for like a word cloud. If I just say, how are you feeling today? And, I just have this kind of pop up of the most common words people are typing in. And it just gives me a quick sense of how people are feeling in a word cloud. So definitely use that as you see fit. And again, as you're comfortable. And if you find that you have a tech savvy co-facilitator, um, lean on them. Ask them if they've used any of that software before. If not, use Google Docs. If you're saying maybe your first question on there is how you're feeling, and you can just have those representations there as well. So it's up to you. Okay. All right, so during the meeting, I just wanted to go through this kind of list of things to keep in mind. I do think that it's good to build consensus. This kind of goes back to even building out those meeting norms or the group agreements. You want to try to make sure that the decisions that you're making during the meeting, the action items, that people agree to them and that they are something that they have buy-in. So you want them to pay attention, build that consensus. Be considerate and validate any reactions. So if people have a adverse reaction to something or a reaction you weren't expecting to something, actually address it. If you have that time, address it in the moment or address it after. But make sure that that person is heard and validate what they're saying and feeling, because it may be coming from a place you didn't think of, or maybe a perspective you hadn't thought of on a particular topic. Be flexible. I think I've said that so many times, and provide clarity. So those action items in your follow-up plan are a really great way to provide clarity. Okay, we made this decision and this is who's taking care of it. So make sure that that's something that you just keep in mind as you are going through your meeting. Okay, so our first engagement questions, I actually had to let the chat go, so definitely help me out here, Devin. But what is one golden rule you use during online meetings? I am inviting you can see I've given you instruction on the page to use the chat, or you can unmute your voice and video to respond. I would like to see if we could get 2 to 3 people to respond here if we can. And one thing I will know, if you're not as savvy with Zoom, is if you're presenting your screen and you try to view the chat after, it takes a long time. Like I clicked on it when I first read this question and it still hasn't popped up. So I'll just wait for Devin to tell me if we have a chat, but just keep that in
we have a
mind.
couple of chats coming in. Anita's sharing, treat others as you want to be treated.
Yes.
Adriana is saying, mute your mic. Elizabeth is saying, raise hand feature is a must.
Yes. So,
I'm a huge fan of start on time, end on time, or maybe early if you can, especially on Zoom.
Yes. That goes along with the prep work. If you are somebody who you put all your meetings on your calendar, maybe actually even drag your calendar, your start time up 5 minutes, just so it can remind you earlier. I actually, in Google Calendar, I have my calendar remind me like 20 minutes before the meeting and 10 minutes before the meeting, so I can do 2 reminders. That's just me, because I need that still, that second reminder. I just want to invite everyone, if you have a golden rule and you're leading meetings, make sure you put that at the beginning of your meeting. Something that I feel like people say maybe during or at the end of, oh, I should have told everybody to mute your mics. Make sure you say that at the beginning. Make sure it's well known that you want people to do those things. And I love somebody saying, treat other people the way you would want to be treated, because I think that's true any and everywhere, right? And I think, I told you guys, or I gave you an advice to use a breathing exercise, and then we went through it. So model things. If you want other people to do things, model that action, that activity, if you can, to the best of your ability. Okay, any more comments, Devin?
We have Caitlin sharing, I've only really done instructional sessions, but I try to encourage participation, whether through hand raising or speaking or through chat, and we'll pause screen share to check my chat periodically.
Yes.
Larry is suggesting get permission for recording the meeting beforehand, which is a good point. Hannah is saying stay engaged, even if it means putting my phone on do not disturb to avoid distraction. Yeah.
Yes.
Any sort of audio notifications on like my
Oh, yeah.
laptop or phone immediately takes my focus away.
Yeah, you're like, oh, it's kind of like, like dog and a squirrel moment. Like, squirrel, like, what is that? Yeah. So definitely turning those off. Yeah, definitely.
I've become my dog with the squirrel.
We're just so distracted these days.
Yeah. Laura's suggesting be prepared to help participants troubleshoot audio and video.
Yeah.
And Mallory is saying modeling with some instruction. So I'm finding
Yes.
out that folks might not know all the features available in Zoom and other tools.
Yeah. Yes. All of the above. Thank you. I think those are really great options. And for those of you looking for some meeting norms, you got a good list there. And hopefully even the resource I shared on through the slideshow will help you too. So some of those things are great. Love it. So one of my golden rules, or one of my things that I've tried to make a norm during the pandemic, is get comfortable with silence. Before I was saying I couldn't see the chat window, I'm hoping Devin, and we, had to wait a beat or two before people started typing in the chat. Get comfortable with silence, especially in online settings. I was talking earlier about how people are contemplating their answers, especially if it's a large concept and maybe you didn't give them the pre-work that they needed beforehand. But there really are times when there's people like me who, in the moment, you're sometimes like, I don't know how I feel about that. I'm not sure. I will even say what I'm doing right now, I do during meetings sometimes. I'll actually use body language, and I am one of those people. I'm kind of I forgot we did NC Live actually had a training earlier this summer about different types of people and how certain people love to have their video on, and I'm one of those people. And I was like, oh, that validated me loving to put my video on. I'm sometimes the only person who has the video on in the meetings, but I will definitely do a kind of a head nod or a look down or a look up like I'm thinking, or I'll tap the chin like I am now. And I actually do have to think. So build in time for people to react or to have a reaction or to engage. Give them that time. Ask them follow-up questions, repeat the question. And I would just say too, even like what I just did now in our last session, in our last question, is I asked Devin if there was more answers. I could have just moved on because I'm like, oh, I got to get through this. But I wanted to make sure that if there were more comments, that people were able to have those comments read because I have the time. Okay. And then the other thing that you could do is that YouTube has plenty of videos where it gives you a timer. So you can just type in 5-minute timer YouTube. I use this for my instruction session, and I haven't used it in a meeting yet. Oh, actually, no, I did use it in a board meeting, in a personal meeting, where you can say, okay, we're going to talk about this thing for 5 minutes. We are talking about it. We're going to talk about it, you guys. And you can maybe put a video up or put a timer up on the screen that says, okay, we're giving it 5 minutes. And whether that entire 5 minutes is silence or not, give yourself the option to at least have that 5 minutes for people to talk and to think about it. Because some people really do need that time. And if you're like me, or if your participants are like me, sometimes you're thinking about that thing and you're ready to talk and then they move on. And you're like, oh, but if I knew that we only had a minute left, I might have kind of just formed my question quicker or my comment quicker, or I might have just, thought, okay, well, I'm going to email them later, and maybe not kind of got prepared to unmute myself and do all that. So, all right. So, after the meeting, what are you going to do? So follow up in a timely manner. I sometimes will actually, when I schedule a meeting, I schedule my planning time, maybe a week in advance or 2 weeks in advance. And then I plan my kind of follow-up time, even if it's just 15 minutes to send out that email with the meeting agenda and notes, with the action items. I make sure that I follow up on anything, if there's an action item that's on me, I send those email out or I do those activities. I always say you have to have assessment that matters. So I do this I say this in the after the meeting part because, again, if it doesn't serve you and your participants, ask yourself, do I need to ask this question? Do I need them to just be aware and be informed about something? And I don't need to send a Google survey out. But if you do, if you need something to be anonymous feedback, if you need people to comment on a certain topic, or you need them to vote anonymously, definitely do that. So whatever assessment you do, especially if it comes at the end or after the meeting, just make sure it's something that matters. Schedule the next meeting. I am notorious for it. If I'm in the meeting and I'm like, oh, I got 5 or 10 minutes left. Hey, can we look at our calendars right quick and see when we can meet next? If it's not a recurring meeting. So I know a lot of people like recurring meetings, and I do too. That's great. You can always schedule around that. But sometimes if you have a team of 10, 15, 30 people, it's not that easy to have a recurring meeting. So try, if you can, schedule your next meeting and then keep communicating. Once again, if you feel like there's an action item that you have to follow up on 2, 3 weeks later, send that out. And maybe you can actually even send out an update when you send out the agenda for the next meeting. Okay. Next question, last question as well. How do you feel when you finish leading or attending a boring meeting? And I put quotations around boring because I think you can define that in different ways. I think I would define a boring meeting as this didn't need to happen. I could have got this in an email. There was nothing that we need to discuss or really deliberate on. And that's not necessarily a boring meeting, but it's something that I felt like, man, I could have just read an email for 10, 15 minutes, and So type in the chat. I've given you instruction on the slide. Tap it, type in the chat, or if we have a brave soul this time that might want to unmute and make a comment.
So Natalie sharing wasted time. Kristen is saying annoyed that my time has been wasted. Mallory saying frustrated. Caitlin saying frustrated. I could have done so many other things at that time.
Yes.
Jane saying as though I lost valuable time, frustrated and irritated with the planner, also wasted time. Yeah, it's frustrating over Zoom because I feel like we're being expected to be in more meetings in general. And I think the toughest part is really when facilitators put like the most important thing that they were meant to talk about at the end, and then it's only 5 minutes is spent on that or something.
Yeah.
It's
prioritize.
Yeah.
I was just going to say about that, I always feel like the most important thing, or the thing that people want to talk about most, and this, you're aware of this, it may not make logical sense, but put that at the top of the agenda, y'all. Give yourself and others the chance to talk about something and not feel rushed. I think I'm one of those people, I hate that feeling of getting toward the end of a meeting and you need time to talk about certain things. So, and you just don't want to bump them. Maybe it won't matter next month, but it matters now, when you meet. So yeah. What else?
Hannah's echoing wasted time. Evan is sharing, I feel a bit defeated if I lead a boring or unproductive meeting. Adriana is saying, I feel drained. Hannah also added, I find that a lot of people put the hot topic at the end so there's time to discuss, but it never works out that way.
Oh, don't put the top topic at the end. It's going to be burnt.
Yeah. Anita is sharing, every meeting is a valuable learning event, write notes. Yeah.
Yes. I again put boring in quotation marks there because I think I got the answers I thought I would. It's not necessarily that it was boring, but you just felt like it was a waste of time. So those of us who are leading meetings, who feel like we just have to have a meeting about this, again, in your preparation time, really reflect on, do I need to have this meeting? Could an email serve this better? Could talking to individual people serve this topic item better? Is this a global topic I need to talk about with the entire team? Just definitely consider that. And I just have a note here. If you feel like you yourself are having boring meetings, but no one else is saying that to you, no one's giving you that feedback, challenge that feeling. Don't, if people are saying, great meeting, thanks for having that meeting, or that's, you make a good point, believe them.
Yeah.
I think the pandemic and having Zoom meetings, sometimes people are just like, did I just waste your time? People are so worried about having a boring meeting. If no one told you it was boring, it probably wasn't boring. And I just want to tell you, people here, you're probably not having boring meetings. And if you just kind of follow some of the things I'm suggesting, you probably will never have another boring meeting, hopefully. The other thing is if you are a participant and you attend a boring meeting, challenge yourself and challenge the facilitator for your meeting and say, hey, I just felt like maybe this could have been done better in an email, or, be as considerate as possible and just kind of say, I think we probably don't need to meet for a couple months, right? Like we're coming up on the holidays. Maybe it's just time to not meet anymore. Okay, so,
Natalie has her hand raised. If you want to unmute yourself.
Yes.
Yes, hi. So something I was thinking about when you were talking about planning, you talked about, timing things out. I know sometimes, I'll have an online meeting and that one little nugget that I need only takes 10 minutes out of a 30-minute meeting. So sometimes it might be a good idea to, in your agenda, have that timing. So if that's one particular thing someone needs to make sure they're listening, watching, that, they can make sure, they're at least 5 minutes before that time to make sure they get that information. So I think that would be helpful.
Oh, yes. Yes. If you have someone who's only there for part of the meeting, try to put them at the beginning, or at least have it timestamped so okay, they're coming in at 2:30. And again, this is where a co-facilitator works out, right? Maybe your co-facilitator can email or tell that person, okay, so you're going to be on in 5, join us in the Zoom meeting in 5, or what have you. So I think that's really great. Okay. Couple more slides. I know engagement is key, right? There's a ton of technology out there. I've suggested some, but don't use it. I think I've said this several times. Only use it if you really feel like it will actually be meaningful. I was talking to Devin. I was like, oh, well, maybe I'll use some polling assessment questions. And Devin was like, well, I sent out a pre-survey. And I was like, perfect. We don't really need to do that. And I feel like we would have some great open-ended questions toward the end. So use a parking lot. If you find that you have a contentious meeting and you feel like there are a lot of people talking over each other, one item, again, just to give you a facilitation tip, use a speakers list. Try to be mindful of who said they want to speak first. The speakers list is also one of those things where you have to keep an eye on your time. And maybe you give people 2 minutes to speak, and maybe 1 minute to respond. We've all been through a lot of debates in the last year or two, political debates. And maybe you can kind of see that allotting a certain amount of time actually does help us get through a topic. So be mindful of that. Okay. And then again, just think back to priorities. If you need a certain level of engagement, communicate that beforehand so people can make the decisions when they come into the virtual meeting. All right. And then this is just a speed round and a kind of follow up, and then we're done. And I'm actually going to be earlier than I thought I would be, so that's great. Google is your facilitation best friend. So some of the things I suggested, the parking lot, energizers, icebreakers, conversation starters, follow-up questions, open-ended questions. I talked about meeting norms and guidelines, stuff like that. Google that. There are several different learning and development or team facilitation stuff that's out there that's really great. So definitely use that. Leverage the skills of your participants. If someone says, hey, I'm really savvy with Zoom and you're not, make them a co-facilitator. Give them a chance to show some leadership skills if that's something that you can do. I wouldn't lean on them too much, but lean on them as much as you feel is appropriate. I'm one of those people that I just spoke up in one meeting and next thing you knew, I was just leading a bunch of meetings all the time. So leverage the skills of the people that you work with. that you manage even potentially. Only use technology if it makes sense. And if there's one thing that you take away from this, practice, 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 so that if you are using technology or anything else, you have a handle on it and you know it like the back of your hand. So with that, I'm going to say, and then also the last slide is the resources slide, but I am taking questions now, and we have, I think I'm usually overtime, y'all. So this is really great for me. So if you have any questions for me, just in general, or you want to come on and give your own tips and tricks and techniques, please do. I feel like I'm learning from you as much as you hopefully have learned from me. So thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Angel. Kristen is asking, does anybody have any tips for cutting off unproductive conversations or comments? I'm thinking of times when people get off topic or you get stuck and the discussion isn't moving forward. It feels rude to cut people off, but sometimes you just need to move on to stay on schedule.
So my advice for that would be, if there's someone who's speaking heavily, this could be something that you fold into your meeting norms and just say, we want everyone to have a chance to speak equally, if that's appropriate, because there's some times where you may not need people to speak on equal time. But then I think you use the parking lot. And if you have already established that you've used a parking lot, just say, we've kind of gotten off topic. We have some other items that we need to get through. Or you can even just say, I think we need to do more research. I think we need to have more conversation about this, but we might need to be more informed about a particular item. So let's do some research and come back to that. Or let's have a whole meeting about this thing. It seems that this was something that a lot of people are passionate about that I wasn't aware of. And I want to gain some perspective, and maybe we should have a 30-minute meeting, a 15-minute meeting about just this thing. So those are just some suggestions I would make, but I'm curious if anyone else has any advice for that particular situation.
I would like to just follow up on what Kristen asked. You gave good suggestions about what to do, but do you just say, oh, whoever's, went off on a tangent, or perhaps this meeting is their only option where they think they have a chance to speak? And you just say, oh, excuse me. How do you, get to the point where you get them to stop speaking? How do you kind of guide them? Or, do you say at the beginning of the meeting, if you hear this sound, that means, we've gotten off topic? What do you have suggestions on the best way to, tell that person, we need to move on, or something like that?
I mean, I think you just dive in. I think you do just kind of go, I really think we've gotten off topic. I hear what you're saying, acknowledge what they're saying. Talked about validation a little bit earlier. But I think you just interject, even if they're speaking, just say, I don't mean to interrupt, but I feel like we are getting way off topic. We're not talking about anything that's germane to what we originally had to talk about. And I think you can then use that tactic of saying, maybe I should do some more research. Maybe we should all do more research and educate ourselves about this topic, come back to it or something. And I think that that's like kind of the facilitation skill of diverting, using that parking lot if you feel it's useful. Like, we can come back to it at the end of the meeting if we have time, or create another meeting. But I think that as long as you're acknowledging what they're saying and acknowledge that, you're aware that they have a voice in the meeting, I think you just have to get in there, apologize for interrupting, and just kind of be direct.
Okay, thank you.
Larry is suggesting something a little bit similar, saying, I usually try to draw some valuable kernel out of what they're saying, make a point about it, or affirm it in some way, and then move to the next item.
Yes. Love that, Mary.
I wanted to share that I like to use the phrase, I want to be respectful of everyone's time. And so when you say, excuse me, I want to be respectful of everyone's time, we have other items to get to. I like that phrase. And I didn't even realize I was saying it on a committee that I was on earlier this year. And they pointed it out to me. They're like, I love that phrase. I'm like, I didn't even realize I was saying that, but I was like, I was being such a taskmaster. Like, I was like, I got to get through things on this agenda and there's so much to do. But I think that's a good phrase. And the other thing that I like to do as a facilitator, if someone is going off on a tangent or just wants, or even if they're just like wanting to talk about the same thing, to assign them work. So it doesn't just get put into the parking lot. They go to the parking lot themselves. So yeah, to just say, you know, it sounds like you're very passionate about this. Can you go and investigate this and come back to us at the next meeting? So
So I was putting a task on the actual facilitator or the leader of the meeting, but maybe you can kind of turn that around and say, I think maybe like, can you do some more research on that and then bring that back to us, or, you know, email it out to us and we can try to schedule something in the future. Love that. Yes.
We have Ashley is raising her hand.
Okay.
So Ashley, if you want to unmute.
Yeah, thank you both so much. My question has to do with balancing like silence with keeping people engaged, and it's coming more from like an instruction experience, like an online instruction experience where I used some polling software, but I felt like the time it took for people to get to the software and get all their answers in, I was losing people, especially the people that were online. So yeah, if you could just speak to balancing being comfortable with silence with not losing people, where I feel often over Zoom, you can lose people more easily because you're not as physically present.
Yes. I think this is something I might not have a clear answer for, because you're right. I think if there's some people who are already engaged, took the poll question as soon as you posted it, and then they're just waiting for other people, because you're like, oh, okay, we have 50 people in here and only 5 people took the poll. Let's get some more people taking, you know, you lose those people who were kind of the early responses. Then maybe in the middle, you kind of lose people who are still kind of deciding. And then you may have had people who were not at their computers. And I think in that sense, I think you fill the silence with follow-up questions, or you repeat the question, or you just kind of, you know, maybe provide an example. So if you're asking a question and you say, you know, what do you think this person is doing in this meme? I've been doing some visual literacy stuff. And I go, well, he's got tea in his hand and, you know, he's sipping on tea. You know, tell me what you think this person is doing. If they're not sipping on tea, what else are they doing? You know, so maybe just fill the time. But I also just want people to kind of get in that mindset of making silence the norm. Silence might, you know, I don't think you'll be able to engage everyone in every level, I think is what I should say. And sometimes you will lose people, and at a certain point you can only do so much. So do what you can. And if there is silence and you need to have that silence for whatever reason, take that time. Take it, you know. The balance is interesting. It definitely is. I'm curious if anybody else had any suggestions or advice on that topic.
Thank you so much, Angel. I really appreciate that response. That was really helpful.
Okay.
Mallory is in the chat saying, in instruction sessions, specifically one-shots, especially over Zoom, this is something I talk with faculty and instructors before the session. What works with your students? They've given me good advice for different ways to engage. Yeah, that's a really good point, that they'll know their students online best.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've found that it's been so uneven with faculty, with platform. Some are just like, I started with WebEx, I'm only using WebEx, so then I have to kind of relearn WebEx. Some are using Zoom, and we even we're Google Campus, so some are using Google Meet too, and you're just kind of like, okay, how do you do, you know? And I'm surprised when they do instruction sessions on Google Meet. But I think that's a great maybe way to kind of, if you are maybe facilitating something that you're not necessarily leading, ask people what works for them, what they've used before, what, you know, have you used Poll Everywhere before? One thing I did see that I didn't mention in the presentation is if people try to use polling software with them in a playful way before maybe using it in a work way. So if you have a social hour that you've planned, use poll everywhere as a trivia tool. Have some playful trivia. People will get used to using it so that maybe when you use it in the future, they're like, oh, I remember this software. We use this for trivia. So if you want to get people who maybe aren't tech savvy, you could do that as well. I think we also had a question in the pre-survey about how do you balance chit chat and socializing, what you want to do because you're not in person, with getting through things. And I just say, schedule social hours, schedule 30 minutes once or twice a month so that all people are doing is socializing. And just see if that's something that people will respond to. So, oh, we're right at time. I'm sorry.
Yeah, let's see. I don't think we have any additional questions in the chat. I know a couple of folks mentioned that they're teaching librarians. And so next week we have a session on best practices for online instruction with several of the teaching librarians from UNC Chapel Hill, who said before the session that they have taught more this semester than they ever have in previous semesters. And I think if you're looking for different ways to manage that and deal with that silence on Zoom and burnout, feel free to come attend that on Wednesday.
I will be there for that.
Good.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care, and keep an eye out for that follow-up email. Thank you so much, Angel, for this. This was so great.
Of course.